Thank you. I was talking to the Boy Scouts backstage, and if we have time today, I'll explain to you the Badge of Merit. This is the original Badge of Merit. This is what 828 is really all going to be all about. The original Badge of Merit given by George Washington. All the Boy Scouts sat in the back as I told them the story, and none of them had ever heard of it. Most Americans have never heard of it. It is a crucial and important story that we all understand. It goes back to God, and here's where we're going to begin. Faith. There is a perversion of faith that is going on in our country right now. A wicked, wicked perversion. And it is all about social justice. It's all about collective salvation. It's actually all about Marxism. Marxism. Let's go over how America really has always worked. And it really goes back to the merit badge of George Washington. George Washington knew if we were going to be a country that survived, we had to be a country of merit. We had to be a country of individual merit, a country of honor, and a country of God. That's the only reason we could beat England. So, Americans have always put God first. And from God, we got our morals. How do we behave? How do we treat each other? Where does charity come from? We get those ideas, and we always have, from God. So when we were faced with a problem like global warming, we would solve it. Well, where does social justice fit in? And how does socialism work? And now we're working on the redistribution of wealth. Listen to the gentleman who has just been appointed as our Medicare and Medicaid director. When I first started this program, they were still saying that I was bearing false witness at saying that health care was all about redistribution of wealth. Well, look who the president has just appointed. A man who says health care must, quote, must be about redistribution of wealth. That's Marxism. In the early 1900s, when progressivism first began, the evil Woodrow Wilson. Who's with me on that? You wouldn't believe how many crazy professors are out there going, I hate that he hates Woodrow Wilson. And that's what helps me sleep at night. They tried to do this before. The turn of the century with Woodrow Wilson, he hated the Constitution. He hated the Founding Fathers. They couldn't get things done because we understood God first and we got our morals from God. So God was in charge. Our churches, our faith led the way. And our Constitution, we knew it. And our Founding Fathers, we loved. They had to dismantle them. Because you couldn't get God to do global warming and socialism and redistribution of wealth and Marxism. It wouldn't work. But if you read this up, it works. If you look and you start with Marxism, you'll never sell Americans redistribution of wealth. But if you start here with Marxism, Marxist, sure, they want redistribution of wealth. Americans won't do it, so you got to change the name. You change it to socialism. You soften it. The Fabian Society did this in England in the early turn of the century. Socialism. But that didn't work for Americans either. We don't want to be socialist. We're connected up here. So we changed it to social justice. Social justice. Global warming. Now you got the problem. Well, we can solve it with social justice. God is telling you now, listen to your heart. Ecological justice, eco-justice for global warming. Do you see how we've been played? The same thing here, healthcare. It's social justice. Education, the border, it's social justice. Look, we don't hate anybody. I don't want anybody to not have healthcare. I don't want any good family coming here and living in the shadows. Immigration is crucial to this country. We had Ellis Island for a reason. We lost our way, and immigrants came here and made us better every single time. But we ask, no, we don't ask. We demand that you come through the front door. God develops his rules. The entire universe, nature's God, is a God of rules, is a God of structure. He builds a house that is a house of order, period. You don't take things out of order. You come through in order with all things. Now, you can't get to Marxism this way, but you can this way. You can destroy America this way. We were built on God as our foundation. God was our foundation. And through God and our churches, we learned charity. And we took care of things. And the smallest point on the pyramid was government for those things that we just couldn't do ourselves. They flipped it. God is now the smallest. In every way, they are excusing God and pushing God out while using God. They've replaced him with social justice. And government is the biggest. This is a perversion. This is the cancer. Collective salvation. This is important. This is critical for people to understand. Christians, I don't care what your faith is, Christians believe Jesus Christ died on the cross for me. He died for you and you and you and you. He died for all of us, but not collectively. We must accept that as individuals. I can't save you. You must save you through his atoning power. That's it. You must accept it individually as a guy who did it. I know. The president has given speech after speech after speech on collective salvation. He has said it in front of universities. We have played the tapes. Collective salvation, it is a perversion. It is liberation theology. Jeremiah Wright teaches it. It's actually from a guy named Cone. You must understand this. Collective salvation. Jesus was a victim. Jesus was a victim. The tomb is irrelevant. Him rising is irrelevant. We must save everyone, or we're not saved. That's the idea. That's wrong. And it puts someone in power. When they're in power, if they believe in collective salvation, it puts them into the position of the Messiah. It puts them in the position of, I must do these things. I must force these people to do this. And what is the road to salvation? The road to salvation, you're either an oppressor or you're the oppressed. You're a victim or you're the people victimizing. So the victims must take the power and the wealth from these people. That's what it is. And if these people, they can voluntarily give up their stuff and their position and their power, and if they won't do it, then these people must do it to save them. Let that sink in, because that's what we're dealing with. We must restore faith. And the best guy to do that, the best guy to be able to, we don't have to argue back and forth about religion. We don't have to argue with facts that nobody has. The facts are all there. They've just been erased by the progressives. So let's find the facts. Let's restore faith. Let's restore the faith of the founders. I'd like to introduce you to a guy who has been collecting the actual documents. I love hearing people argue against him. Is that I never said that, and he'll reach into his briefcase. Well, here's a letter signed by him. George Here's Thomas Jefferson saying that, and it's his original handwriting here. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome David Barton.
Hey, bro. Thanks, guys. Good to be with you. Thank y'all. Let me start out by just pointing out really some of the blessings we do enjoy. 2 weeks ago, we had our national birthday. When we celebrated the 4th of July 2 weeks ago, we set another world's record. Nobody's been as long under the same piece of paper as we've been under that piece of paper. Now, there's 192 nations at the UN this year. That number goes up and down every year. Do you guys realize we are the only one out of the 192 nations that does not average a revolution every 30 to 40 years? I think it's pretty cool that we don't have a revolution every generation. Now, you look anywhere else in the world, it's going on. You look at France, they've had 15 governments while we've had just one. If you jump over to Poland there in the center, Poland's had 7 governments since 1921. If you jump over to the far edge there on the right, Russia's had 4 governments since 1917. You jump further off the map, you go to Afghanistan, they had 5 governments in the 20th century, 5 constitutions in the 20th century. They've already had another one this century. I mean, we're the most stable nation in the history of the world by a long shot. Nobody else even comes close. We're also the most prosperous nation in the world. You see, we have only 4% of the world's population, but we have 25% of the world's wealth. Did you know that according to figures from the U.S. Census Bureau, if you live below poverty, and we don't want anybody living below poverty in America, but if you live below the poverty level in America, you are more likely to own a telephone, a television, you're more likely to have an air conditioner, you're more likely to have an automobile, you're more likely to eat more red meat and have more square footage of living space than the average middle class in Europe. Did you get that? If you live below the poverty level in America, you're higher than the middle class in Europe. Do you realize how blessed we have been in this country? I mean, it's unbelievable the blessings we enjoy. And this is called American exceptionalism. That was a term given us back in 1831 by Alexis de Tocqueville, a French historian who came here and saw this, said this is exceptional. I don't think any other nation will ever do what the Americans do. Now, what philosophy produced American exceptionalism? Well, to know that philosophy, we go back to the guys who gave us that philosophy, the founding fathers. They tell us what that philosophy is in 45 simple words at the beginning of the Declaration of Independence. 45 simple words. They say, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. They're endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. Now, that's the core of American exceptionalism, and out of that, there are 3 very simple principles that come out. We, from a government standpoint, not individuals, yeah, individuals too, but the government says, hey, we in the government believe that there's a creator. Number 1, that's what our document says. We acknowledge there's a creator. Number 2, we believe that that creator gives certain guaranteed rights to man. And number 3, we believe government exists to secure the rights that God gives to every individual. Not collective, as Glenn said, it's not collective, it's individual stuff. Now, if you don't get that philosophy down, you will never have limited government. You can't have limited government without, and that's what these guys understood. Limited government comes from that because if our rights don't come from God, they must come from man. They must come from government. And if government gives you something, government has a right to take away from you or to regulate or to abolish whatever it gives. Therefore, if rights come from man, if they come from government, government's allowed to get into every single stinking thing out there. Only if you recognize that there's a God, He gives rights, and we exist to protect what He's given. Therefore, we can't touch those rights. That's the only way you ever have limited government. Limited government's not the size of government. It's the intrusion and the scope of government. It's what it gets into. And see, that's what the Founding Fathers understood. Now, when you see that document, you see the philosophy that we call American exceptionalism, you know, it sounds to me like the founders were talking pretty strong about faith in God. And, of course, today we're told, oh, no, secular nation, godless constitution, Founding Fathers, atheist, agnostics, deists. You know, it is an interesting thing about these guys. Fortunately for us, everything is recorded. They did on paper what we do with cameras and tapes and VCR.